We will have some bright skies for a time, but it will turn gradually cloudy across England and Wales as we go through into the afternoon. Thicker cloud winds across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland generally, but because of the southerly flow that we have, I'm expecting some brighter spells across the far north of Scotland, and here's where the temperatures are likely to be highest, possibly getting into double figures. Through the end of the day on Monday, we're going to see that front I mentioned earlier pushing into the far northwest, so bringing a spell of rain to the far northwest of Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go through the night. Clear skies though again across much of England and Wales, so once more we're likely to see a fairly widespread and harsh frost, and again the risk of some fog and freezing fog patches as we go through into Tuesday morning. Through Tuesday itself then, that front is gradually going to push its way southwards, pushing into parts of southern Scotland, northern England as we head into the afternoon, staying drier and brighter towards the south, and also some sunshine developing across northern Scotland as we go into the afternoon as well. Just a few showers for the northwest. Some further changeable weather in the north through this week, always dry and brighter towards the south, but also chilly with some further frost and fog by night.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right...
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, Britain needs to end a culture of tax and spend. The country needs a dose of tough economic love. And if you don't like it, tough luck. My Mark Meets guest is former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland. He's live in the studio after 10. In the big question, should Rishi Sunak bring back Liz Truss? And in the news agenda with my panel, should Labour go anti-woke to win the next election? How soon should new mothers go back to work? and is asking for a doggy bag at a restaurant unsophisticated. We do it all the time. And let me tell you, the dog doesn't get the food, we get the food. Lots to get through, a busy 2 hours to come, including my big opinion. But first, the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. A private underwater rescue company will join the search for Nicola Bulley as fresh images of the missing mother of two have been released. The specialist diving company SGI will assist police searching the River Wyre after offering its services free of charge. It comes hours after the first images of Nicola on the day she disappeared were released by her family. Lancashire Police believe she fell into the river, but SGI's chief executive, Peter Faulding, says many elements of that theory don't add up.
Nicola was last seen in the top field by the witness. You know, there's nothing to say she couldn't have been kidnapped and dragged and put in a car and taken away, and someone could have put a mobile phone by the river as a decoy, or Nicola wanted to disappear herself. It just doesn't ring right. The amount of searches that's gone on in this river, the body, if there was a body in there, is no way going to go all the way down to the sea, not with us that current.
The Metropolitan Police have again apologised to the victims of the serial rapist David Carrick ahead of his sentencing hearing tomorrow. The sacked police constables admitted 49 criminal charges, including 24 counts of rape against 12 women. The force says they are truly sorry for the harm and devastation Carrick caused to the victims, saying he should never have been a police officer. The Met also says they're determined to address issues in the force.
In the weeks since he pleaded guilty, we have spoken about our genuine and urgent commitment to address the systemic failings that have been identified by our own reviews, by those of His Majesty's Inspectorate and Baroness Casey. We are determined to root out those who corrupt our integrity, and that work is already underway.
The UK's biggest nurses' unions offered to call off next week's planned strikes in England if the Prime Minister makes a new meaningful pay offer. The RCN's appeal to Rishi Sunak to match offers made by the Welsh and Scottish governments, both of which have led to strikes being suspended. Nurses and ambulance staff are combining tomorrow, widely predicted to be the biggest day of strike action in the history of the NHS. Ukraine says it's expecting a possible major new offensive from Russia this month as the anniversary of the invasion approaches. Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov says Ukraine will be able to hold off Moscow's forces, despite not all of the West's military reinforcements arriving in time. However, the country's Foreign Minister, Dmytro Kuleba, says Ukraine will receive up to 140 battle tanks on Tuesday in what he's described as a first wave of reinforcements being supplied by a Western coalition of 12 countries. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. But now, it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who returns in an hour's time. On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, Britain needs to end a culture of tax and spend. The country needs a dose of tough economic love, and if you don't like it, tough luck. In the big question, should Rishi Sunak bring back Liz Truss? My Mark Meets guest is former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland. He's live in the studio just after 10. I'll be asking him from a legal point of view, can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? That's also the topic of my take at 10. We've got tomorrow morning's papers, that's Monday's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. You can set your watch to it. And in the news agenda, should Labour go anti-woke to win the next election? That's the view of Tony Blair, no less. Also, how soon should new mothers go back to work? And is asking for a doggy bag at a restaurant unsophisticated? Do you take food home from the restaurant? Let me know. Now, reacting to those stories and many more tonight are my panel of leading journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov, the leader of UKIP, former Conservative MP, of course, and most importantly, spouse of Christine, it's Neil Hamilton. And last but not least, best-selling author and presenter Emma Wolfe. We'll keep you also updated throughout the show on any developments in relation to the tragic disappearance of Nicola Bulley. We'll be speaking to the forensic expert who is now leading the search for the missing mother of two. I want to hear from you throughout the show, mark at gbnews.uk. For the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Liz Truss is back. Not literally, don't panic. Here is our former Prime Minister who dared to challenge economic orthodoxy by cutting taxes to boost growth, writing in today's Sunday Telegraph. It was a fascinating article. She wrote, "I'm not claiming to be blameless in what happened, but fundamentally, I was not given a realistic chance to enact my policies by a very powerful economic establishment coupled with a lack of political support." She goes on to write, "We've not done enough to make the arguments for a lower tax, more deregulated economy. Ever higher taxes, an ever more restrictive regulatory regime, and historically high levels of state spending are the key underlying causes of our poor economic performance." She is, of course, absolutely right. Now, history will judge her communication skills in office harshly, but it will judge her message and her philosophy kindly. Former US President Ronald Reagan famously once joked, "The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help.'" When left unchecked, the state always grows with an insatiable appetite for the taxes of its citizens and control of their lives. If left unchecked, the state spreads like Japanese knotweed in your garden. And history teaches us that cutting it back is the mother of all economic and political challenges. Normally, it's a crisis that will see government reduce its footprint in our lives. After the economic chaos of the 70s and early 80s, Margaret Thatcher famously slashed taxes, tackled the unions and deregulated the economy, causing an economic boom. After the credit crunch in 2008-2009, the coalition government of 2010 embarked upon 5 years of what many called austerity, but what I call living within our means. To their credit, the budget deficit was reduced from 10% as a share of GDP to around 2% by the end of the decade, equipping us well for the forthcoming economic crisis of COVID. So how did they achieve it? Well, they reduced the size of the public sector, which had ballooned under New Labour. Huge cuts saw public sector jobs disappear. So why didn't unemployment explode? Well, because in that same 5-year period, 1 million new jobs were created in the private sector. Over 5 years, 1 million new jobs created in the private sector. The pandemic response has undone all of that good work, with an expanded and bloated public sector and an unprecedented expansion of the state in our lives, with politicians famously dictating our movements during COVID, stopping us from going out to work, masking our faces and pressurising us into vaccination. The messaging in particular from furlough was catastrophic, normalising the idea that the government will pay you to stay at home, bankrolling your life to the tune of 80% of your salary. This has created a population that thinks the government is responsible for their lives and their livelihoods. No, it ain't. It's an economic freak show. And mark my words, with the international bond markets already nervous about Britain, if we carry on like this, we will slide down the economic league table faster than a fat holidaymaker at a water park. It's no exaggeration to say that we could be Greece times 10. The pandemic has created a something-for-nothing culture, with the Mail reporting last month that more than 50% of Brits, that's right, more than 50% of Brits, receive more from the state in terms of benefits, pensions and public services than they contribute in taxes. This according to a report by the think tank Civitas. Now, this dependent figure was just a third of the population under Tony Blair and even lower under Margaret Thatcher. Now it's half, receiving more than they contribute. With a fast ageing population, how's that going to play out in the years to come? As it stands, in my view, Britain is becoming a failing business model, with millions of working age adults not active in the economy. and with 800,000 young people recently saying they think they may never get a job. If left unchecked, a legacy of debt and decline beckons. The idea that the state can look after you from cradle to grave is a big fat lie. Forget about Brexit, forget about Liz Truss's mini-budget. The elephant in the room is that the state is too big and we spend more than we've got. Our economy and our society needs a tough new culture in which it pays to work and one in which it doesn't pay to sit at home on your arse, watching Netflix and caning six-packs of Budweiser or San Miguel. Britain needs a dose of tough love. And if you don't like it, tough luck. Perhaps Liz Truss was right all along. Many thanks to producer Maria, by the way, for the Ronald Reagan mug from which I will be drinking all evening. What's your view? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is the state now too big? Is that the elephant in the room? Does Britain live beyond its means? I'll get to your thoughts shortly, but let's get the view now of my all-star panel, leading journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov, leader of UKIP and former Tory MP Neil Hamilton, and best-selling author and presenter Emma Wolfe. Emma, let me start with you. Does Britain live beyond its means?
Yes, I think it does, and I agree with you, Mark, for once. I agree with you. I think that we need to... I think the country needs to get back to work. I think, you know, London and the rest of the country have been completely sort of on half measures, really, since the pandemic. I think people are not, millions of adults are not economically or, you know, in employment or inactive. And I think that we really, really need to get on with this. I think Liz Truss is making a very, very good point. I think she's obviously, it's exciting to have some you know, things happening in politics again. Boris Johnson a few days ago giving his television interview, and now Liz Truss last night with this bombshell article in the Telegraph. People have called it a 4,000-word breakdown. Yeah, I think she has a very, very good point.
Indeed, we'll be discussing whether Rishi Sunak should bring Liz Truss back. That's going to be in the company of Edwina Currie and Anne Widdecombe in just a few minutes' time. But Nina Mishkov, we have privileges and duties in society, don't we? The privileges are safe streets. We have policing, education, we have the NHS. But we have duties as well, and that is to be active in the economy and to pay our taxes. And at the moment, half the population are failing to do that.
I agree. I mean, that is a problem. And there are, I think, 1.2 million jobs unfilled. There are all sorts of people who are not within the economy. But you can't blame that on the people themselves. You can't blame that on the state. And I think it's absolutely hilarious that Liz Truss has come out with this article. I mean, the woman is deluded. I mean, for heaven's sake, she's blamed everybody but herself. I mean, she's so blinkered, she's so headstrong, she's so incapable of listening to anybody else that she just blindly follows on. She's so convinced that she's absolutely right. I mean, she really tanked the economy last year. She was completely disastrous, and yet she's pretending as if she's some kind of avenging angel, that she's come back to save us all. I mean, this is just ridiculous.
You know, I accept your pushback on the Liz Truss situation. She does have a case to answer for that poorly delivered, poorly communicated mini-budget. But her point goes beyond her tenure of 44 days at number 10, Nina. I think Britain has most likely been living beyond its means for about 3 decades.
Well, we have, but it will change. But at the moment, we're dealing with the fallout, the financial fallout of COVID and the financial fallout from Brexit. Since Brexit, our economy has shrunk by 5%, which is equivalent to £120 billion a year. Now, that's got to be paid for somehow.
I don't think you can necessarily conflate Brexit with the pandemic, given the fact that the two issues dovetail as to make it inconclusive at this stage.
Since Brexit, that's what's happened.
And since Brexit, we've had a pandemic in which we shut the economy down for 2.5 years.
I mentioned a pandemic as well.
I think give Brexit a decade, but I accept what you've had to say. Nina, plenty will agree with you, others won't. Neil Hamilton, the elephant in the room is that the government, the state is too big. We live beyond our means.
Yeah, this is absolutely right. And of course, the
reality is that Tony Blair is effectively still running the country because nothing has changed since Blair was Prime Minister. When Labour took off the brakes on government spending in 2001, then government spending went through the roof. And this do-nothing Tory administration has made no difference to that in the 12 years that it's been in office. In fact, of course, during the COVID pandemic, they went in the opposite direction in spades. And paying the whole country to sit at home and do nothing effectively for 2 years was inevitably going to have a disastrous effect on the economy. The government deficit this year is going to be £100 billion with no prospect of that coming down unless we can get growth going.
Neil, the clock's against us. Would you shrink the size of the state? Would you have radical austerity?
No, I don't think we need austerity. And it's a fantasy to think that you can do this in the short term. During the Thatcher government, the only way that the state was shrunk was relative to the size of a growing economy. And of course, Thatcher did have a radical urge, which there's certainly no sign of in a Sunak administration. It's complete fantasy to think that this government is going to be radical in any shape or form.
OK, well, there you go. What's your view, Mark, at gbnews.uk? Coming up in the news agenda, should Labour go anti-woke to win the next election, and how soon should new mothers go back to work? My Mark Meets guest live in the studio, Sir Robert Buckland. But next, in the big question with Anne Widdecombe and Edwina Currie, should Rishi Sunak bring back Liz Truss? See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a big reaction to my big opinion, which I've got to say that Paige from our digital team is currently crafting into a video which you can find on GB News on Twitter at GB News. By the way, Robert Buckland MP is live in the studio as my Mark Meets guest at 10 o'clock. Can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? I'll be putting that to him shortly. Yes, the UK needs to get people working, says Susan, in response to my big opinion. If people get more for working and less on benefits, things will improve. The childcare needs to be aimed at working people rather than ones staying at home. Mark, people are taught how to live off the state, i.e. citizens' advice. It's easy not to work until, says Dave, you have no choice. And finally, Stephen says Truss only failed because she gave in to Team Rishi and his World Economic Forum handlers. Lots to come, including this. Yes, it's time for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Making an explosive return to public life, Liz Truss has used an article in today's Sunday Telegraph to defend her actions as Prime Minister during her ill-fated 44 days in charge, saying that she was right to cut taxes and go for growth. Now, given that the IMF have predicted a recession this year, partly as a result of our higher taxes, has she been proved right? Given that her message about shrinking the size of the state is a deeply conservative one, and given the fact that she wants to make the economy more lean and more efficient and make Britain a low-tax haven for investment, should she have a seat around the cabinet table? So that's tonight's big question. Should Rishi Sunak bring back Liz Truss? Let's discuss this now with former Conservative government minister and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe and another former Conservative government minister and best-selling author. It's the Clash of the Titans, Edwina Currie. Edwina, this is a very experienced politician and cabinet minister who served in the Treasury, the Foreign Office and the Trade Department. Surely she has a contribution to make to public life.
Yeah, well, she got to be Prime Minister and turned out to be an absolute disaster. I mean, you know, what she's actually done over this weekend is wrong. She should be supporting the Conservative Prime Minister. If she wants to criticise anybody and still wants to be a politician, how about having a go at Labour and the strikes? There's big strikes tomorrow, Monday, which are going to cause an awful lot of pain and disruption. That would be a very good target. But instead, she has to go at just about everybody. And, you know, she's fundamentally not understood what happened. I mean, she talks about we need to make the arguments. Nobody's been making the arguments for growth. Oh, well, I agree. But then if you're Prime Minister, you're in prime position to be able to do that. And she was hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. When she opened her mouth, nothing came out. She held press conferences where she wouldn't take any questions from the press. I mean, you know, and also her remedy, actually going for growth by cutting the taxes of the richest, was designed, I think, ultimately to be really quite offensive to an awful lot of people. It wasn't going to go in her way. And she really never, ever understood it. And she doesn't understand it any better now. No, for heaven's sake, don't put her anywhere near the cabinet ever again.
Well, look, that's Edwina Currie not sitting on the fence. Anne Widdecombe, the bottom line is that, yes, her communication was found wanting as Prime Minister. The execution of that mini-budget was poorly delivered. However, the message was right, and surely that's a voice that should be heard in Cabinet. Low taxes and proper Conservative values.
Well, I would have rather hoped that, you know, it wouldn't just be Liz Truss who would make that voice heard. That voice should be regularly being heard around the cabinet table, because low taxes, high growth, making us competitive, all those things are good, sound Tory policies, and it takes a lot of believing that they're not discussed. But if they are discussed, they're certainly not followed. Now, do I think she should be in the cabinet? Not at this juncture. No, because I think it would be too controversial and it would be a diversion from the main business. But do I think her voice should be heard? Yes. And actually, one of the things that intrigued me about that article was she said that she had not realised some of the implications for pensions, which was quite abstruse when I read it. But hang on. You know, she had all the advice of the Treasury, I presume. She had all the advice of the Pensions Department. I presume if she didn't, then that is a very big question. What the dickens was going on?
Well, indeed, and is this the hand of the blob at work, Anne Widdecombe? Because she said expressly in this Sunday Telegraph article that nobody mentioned this issue about pensions to her, including senior civil servants.
Well, I mean, it just seems to me totally extraordinary. Now, I have no time for what is now called the blob. But I think there are some very good civil servants. I dealt with good civil servants in my time. I also dealt with the other sort. But I do think that the establishment is now following a very one-sided policy and going in one direction. Therefore, I don't have much time for what is disparagingly called the blob. But what I do know is, and Edwina knows as well, is how government works. And it is just beyond comprehension that she wasn't briefed on that particular likely result of the policy that she was implementing. And she doesn't deny in this article that that was a massive, massive stumbling block when it came to actually the policy taking off. She doesn't disguise that. Now, I don't understand it. And what I'm asking is, how was she not told all of that? Or the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, how was he not told all that?
Edwina Currie, was the defenestration of Liz Truss orchestrated by the left within government?
No. It was the whole country going, oh, my God, let's get rid of her quick because she's a disaster. Anne and I have both been ministers. And if you're proposing something that's quite different, something new, one of the things you do is a bit of wargaming. You say to your senior advisors, your civil servants and everyone else, what can go wrong? What can go wrong? Tell me what can go wrong. You know, we are making assumptions here about how to improve things, how to make things happen. And it's plain as anything that Liz Truss, it never occurred to her to say to the senior people in the Treasury or to the OBR, whom they didn't consult, or the Bank of England, what can go wrong with this? Because they would have been told very, very quickly. And it's plain as anything that she wasn't interested in any negative comments that might actually delay this. Now, as for we need to hear this voice from the current cabinet, I agree. And I would counsel you, my sources tell me that March the 15th, which is the date of the budget, the spring budget, will be bringing forward some quite radical changes, and we will see some ideas that will help with growth. They won't be crazy ones, and they won't upset the markets. And I think they will be very, very welcome, and hopefully they'll start to work as soon as possible.
Let me quote from today's article in the Sunday Times, this piece authored by Liz Truss, Edwina. Ever higher taxes, an ever more restrictive regulatory regime, and historically high levels of state spending are the key underlying causes of our poor economic performance. I'll put it to you, notwithstanding the poor delivery and communication around the mini-budget, she's the first Prime Minister in decades, perhaps since Thatcher, to do something about those problems.
But we're also coming out of 2 years of COVID, which has caused all sorts of damage, which you've perfectly adequately described. Plus, there's a war on in Ukraine. And you can't just switch into being optimistic and positive and cutting taxes in those circumstances. You actually have to handle it with a good deal of finesse. And finesse is not something that Liz Truss has ever in her entire career in politics been associated with. So she'd be the worst possible person to put anywhere near the cabinet. The people we've got there now, I think, are very much better at it. And yes, I hope that we will see taxes come down, particularly because, you know, they really are a pain to an awful lot of people. But we have an aging population that needs more public services. That's why we have more people now who are getting more from the state than are paying back. It's one of the factors you can't ignore.
Okay.
Anne and I are both pensioners for a very long time. And you, Mark, and your generation, you're paying for us. And as a result of that, we can't quite do the calculations that we did 40 years ago when Margaret Thatcher came into power.
Well, Anne and Edwina, let me tell you, you're worth every penny, and you look like a pair of teenagers to me. Anne Widdecombe, final thought on this. Liz Truss was a proper Conservative and she's out. What does that tell us about the current political system?
Yeah, she is a proper Conservative. And she failed. Now, I think she did lack finesse. I think that's quite true. I mean, I think finesse is very, very foreign to Liz. But her basic philosophy was right. And above all, it was Conservative. And that is why the party members in the country voted for her, and the parliamentarians deeply resented that. They voted for her because the philosophy and what she wanted to do was right. And I don't want that voice lost. I really don't. I think it would be wrong to bring her back into the cabinet now for all sorts of optics, as they call it. But I do want that voice heard, and I hope she writes some more.
My thanks to two former big hitters from the world of politics, two of the best-known former politicians in the country. They've reinvented themselves as authors and TV personalities, and welcome regulars here on GB News and Mark Dolan tonight. My thanks to Edwina Currie and Anne Widdecombe. Now, we asked you on Twitter whether Rishi Sunak should bring back Liz Truss. I'm not good at maths. Thank God I'm not Chancellor. 54.8%, so just over half, said no. 45.2%, which I think is quite a big figure, say bring her back. Keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.uk. My Mark Meets guest live in the studio is Sir Robert Buckland. He, of course, is a top lawyer as well, former Justice Secretary. Rishi Sunak wants to stop the boats, possibly getting rid of the European Court of Human Rights legislation within the UK. Can Rishi stop the boats? We'll discuss that with Sir Robert Buckland, and it's the subject of my Take at 10 shortly. We've also got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction, but next we'll be speaking to the forensic expert who's now leading the search for the missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley. That's next.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, Fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Let's get more on the very worrying story of Nicola Bulley. The 45-year-old mother of two was last seen walking her dog next to the River Wyre in St Michael's on Wye in Lancashire 9 days ago. Her phone was found on a bench nearby the river and her dog was discovered in a nearby park. But there have been no sightings of her since. Police believe she may have fallen into the river. Joining me now is forensic scientist Peter Faulding, whose company, Specialist Group International, are now leading the search for Nicola after developments today. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. What do we know so far, Peter?
Well, the only information we've got, Mark, is actually that there was a mobile phone found by the river along with a dog harness. So the police have no concrete evidence of where we are. But as with any I'm a forensic search, by the way, not forensic scientist. So I specialise in search. So the idea is that they are putting all their resources down to the river. But in the background, there will be lots of other work going on that the police are conducting, looking at CCTV, ANPR cameras. So it's not just the river that the police are working on. They're putting a huge effort in down with underwater search teams and other equipment as well.
What's happened today, Peter? Have there been any developments today?
Not that I know of. The police are continuing to search, but we offered our help free of charge. And I'll say to send my team up, we carry out all the police diving operations for the whole of the south of England. So we have a dive team, the same as the police, plus a lot of high-tech equipment, specialist sonar that can assist in this search.
You've obviously been allowed to participate in this search. Your services and that of your colleagues have been welcomed by the authorities. Is that significant that you're on board as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. We're always on board, but that's normally out of our area. We cover the southeast, so we're working with the police all the time on search operations. But we offered our services because this is a prolonged search. The police have got a particularly difficult job up there, and we have a specialist piece of equipment called a high-frequency side-scan sonar that we have a very high hit rate with. Each year we deal with a lot of drownings, and we normally locate the victims within the hour very, very quickly using this high-tech kit. So we're taking that along, plus further divers, the same as the police, to assist to get this long stretch of water cleared, so we can either confirm if Nicola's there or deny it, and then resources can be tasked elsewhere.
Why has it taken so long, and could it be that this poor woman is in the river? Is that now a likely outcome?
It's a long shot, really. All they've got to go for at the moment, Mark, is the phone, and that's the problem. And it's sort of easy to speculate. There's a lot of stuff flying around about all sorts of things, but that is all the intelligence they've got of the actual phone by the river, so they have to get that searched. But it's a huge operation. The police divers can only search, the same as us with divers, 100, 150 metres a day. So this is 9 kilometres of river, whatever. So there's peaks and troughs. It's a slow-moving river. If Nicola had gone in the river, she wouldn't have gone far because the river is not in flood. And my experience of dealing with these drowning victims, they don't normally travel far. They often, where they go down, they are there where they fall in. Unless it's a really fast-moving current, which this is not.
Peter, more power to you and your highly skilled team in getting some answers. It's a tragic story and obviously a very, very tough job for you and your colleagues. My thanks to Peter Faulding, whose company Specialist Group International are now part of the search for Nicola. Anyone who has seen Nicola or who has information about where she might be is asked to call 101, quoting log 565 of January the 30th. That's 101, log 565 of January the 30th. And for immediate sightings, please call 999. We'll bring you more on that as and when we get it. Now, moving on, To the seemingly trivial matter of Brexit, but we need to talk about it. It never goes away. Tuesday marked the 3rd year anniversary of Britain's departure from the European Union. Last week, a survey found that 57% of Britons were now in favour of rejoining the EU. So it begs the question, has Britain got Brexit fatigue? Who better to ask than the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton? Neil.
Well, the reality is that this government has made a complete hash of Brexit. It's 7 years, no, not just 3, it's 7 years since we had the referendum result, or it will be in June, and absolutely nothing has been done
They've delivered Brexit. We're out.
Well, only in
no
name.
payments of £2 billion a year, no free movement, no single European army, no ever closer union. We're out.
We are out technically, but nothing has been done to chip away at the carapace of regulation that was imposed upon us by Brussels, much of which we opposed when that legislation was being discussed in the Council of Ministers. I was a member of the Council of Ministers, bizarrely myself, for 2.5 years, so I was in that position of fighting Britain's corner and losing because of the voting system. You know, we know what needs to be done to reduce the burden of regulation. It's not a case of throwing everything out the baby with the bathwater. What this government has done is minuscule in comparison with what we could do. Yes, we don't have to pay into the European budget, so people who want to rejoin will have to tell us where's the 20 billion going to come from that we would have to pay into the European Union budget this year if we were still members of it. So it's a lost opportunity. That is why I think it's been discredited for a lot of people. They think that with all the problems in the background as a result of the government's disastrous policy on lockdowns over COVID, which has wrecked the public finances, and Brexit could have been partly an antidote to that, because if we'd got the British economy growing again, because the unnecessary regulations that we've been forced to accept had been removed, we've done nothing in 7 years to plan for this, let alone actually execute it. That's the real tragedy of this. A Conservative government didn't actually believe in Brexit, and overwhelmingly, of course, Tory MPs in the last Parliament were against Brexit. And so this government, although Sunak was nominally in favour of Brexit, he's the last person to deliver a radical outcome.
I'm a proud Brit. I want Brexit to succeed. But will there come a point where we have to write Brexit off as a failure? Will that moment come?
Well, Brexit hasn't failed. We haven't tried it.
Is there a timeline to make Brexit work? Because I want it to deliver for Britain. I don't want a democratic crisis where we go back in and half the country is furious.
All Brexit is about is this country being able to take decisions for itself, which it wasn't able to take inside the EU.
But we can take decisions now. We can.
This is my point.
We can do trade deals with anyone. Where's the USA trade deal? Where's India? We've got Australia and New Zealand, which is apparently 0.6%. And going to come in 10 years' time. This is all a disaster.
It's not a disaster at all.
It is a complete disaster.
We have done some trade
What
deals.
about the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Exactly,
not
that's another betrayal.
sorted yet. Well, that should have been sorted out
It should
beforehand.
never have been agreed in the first place.
Well, you cannot have a hard border in Ireland.
We didn't want one. If the EU was going to build a hard border, leave it up to them.
Well, the thing was, it was not sorted. It has not been sorted, and we are financially worse off.
We're not financially worse
off. We are financially.
There's absolutely no evidence.
5%. The Sunday Times today said that our economy
I read it in the newspapers. It must be true.
Well, I'm afraid I believe the Sunday Times. I really do. 5% smaller, equivalent to an annual loss of £120 billion.
These are fantasy
But there are other
figures.
reasons for that. There are other reasons for that.
No, this is absolutely down to Brexit.
The fact that we put our economy in the deep freeze for the past 2-3 years.
Quite right.
So have other economies.
So have other
economies.
They're up the spout as well.
But not to our extent. We're going to be the worst performing of any economy.
Arguing.
OK, Emma?
Arguing with itself. Ever since 2016. I mean, I agree with Neil. There were huge, and with you, Mark, there were huge opportunities. And as a proud Brit, I want Brexit to succeed. But it's been bungled, and we haven't seen any of the benefits. And basically, in the last 6 or 7 years, it is 7 years now since 2016.
You say proud Brit, but it's not Britain that wanted Brexit.
52% of us did.
But let's break it down. It was the English. The Scots voted against it. Northern Ireland didn't want it.
So what? Don't be so divisive.
No, it's true.
That's totally irrelevant. I can still call myself a proud Brit.
It's not
We
united.
are the United Kingdom.
And Wales only voted for it because of the expats, British. London voted against it.
Don't talk down to my Welsh viewers.
No,
I'm a Welshman myself.
So it is the English outside of London who voted for it.
The idea of rehashing this whole debate is just
I'm not rehashing
ludicrous.
it. I'm just,
Absolutely ludicrous,
you
Mark.
talk about Britain wanting Brexit. I'm just
we
saying
voted for it.
Britain
Let me
not.
say that Nina, like everyone on this show, is entitled to her view. What is yours? Mark at gbnews.uk. Have you got Brexit fatigue? I haven't, and I voted Remain. I'm confident it will succeed. So, government, please crack on. Coming up in my Take at 10, finally a Prime Minister who's serious about stopping the boats. Rishi Sunak is showing surprise courage by threatening to axe the hated European Court of Human Rights. But next, should Labour go anti-woke to win the next election? I'll speak to a top Labour insider. See you in 3.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, how about this in reaction to my big opinion? Josh says, hi, Mark. I think that Liz Truss is a prime example of what happens when radical change is attempted. She is a true Conservative, but of course, that was not favoured by a left-leaning economy. Thank you for that, Josh. Keep those opinions coming. Have you got Brexit fatigue? I don't. I voted Remain, and I don't have Brexit fatigue, but I want the government to crack on and deliver its potential. This from Alan. Alan, good evening. How are you? Alan says, hi, Mark. The country will have no chance under Labour. Red Wall voters will not buy it. Starmer does not and will not ever accept Brexit. And Mary says, Mark, I don't know where the poll was done, but no one I know who voted Leave has changed their minds. Thank God we haven't had to adopt the 7K plus laws that the EU has enforced since we left. Mary, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.uk. Now, as Nicola Sturgeon's premiership is rocked by huge public anger in relation to her new self-identification laws in relation to trans rights, which has seen a male double rapist who identifies as female accommodated in a women's prison. So in that context and the political damage she has suffered, should Labour rethink so-called woke or progressive policies themselves if they want to achieve power? Their leader, Sir Keir Starmer, himself faced criticism in a TV interview in which he struggled to say what defines a woman and suggested that saying only women have a cervix was a problematic sentence and something you shouldn't say. Sir Keir also divided opinion when he posed for this photograph with his deputy Angela Rayner. Here's the image, taking the knee in the light of the murder of George Floyd in the United States. And the Guardian newspaper reported that Labour's highly successful former leader and 3 times Prime Minister Tony Blair advised Keir Starmer in May of last year to, I quote, drop woke politics and focus on the economy. So should he do just that? As many are becoming sick of stifling political correctness, do the culture wars matter more than Labour realise? And could they be the difference between the keys to number 10 or not? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Labour councillor and leader of the Labour group in Ashford, Brendan Chilton. I forgot to mention, good friend of the show as well. Hi, Brendan.
Good evening, Mark. Good to see you.
Great to see you back on the programme. Is Tony Blair right that Labour should ditch the woke stuff and concentrate on the economy?
Mark, Tony Blair is always right. He was right. I think he was right last year, and I think the Labour Party has listened to Tony's advice. I think one thing that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have done very well over the course of the past year has been an absolute relentless focus on the state of the economy. I know the government continue to say that inflation has been caused by the war in Ukraine. Actually, we had high inflation before the war in Ukraine. We had queues at the pumps for petrol before the war in Ukraine, when we had a Conservative government. And we also had soaring energy bills before the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine hasn't helped, but it has not been the primary cause of the mess we're in. The primary cause has been, unfortunately, 12 years of stagnant growth under successive Conservative governments, where the UK economy has had pathetic levels of productivity increases, which is why we're in the mess we're in now. We haven't gone for growth.
We debated earlier in the programme, in response to my big opinion, whether the state is now too big. You'll be well aware of that research coming out of Civitas last week, the think tank, who suggested that over 50% of the public now receive more in benefits and public services than they contribute in taxes. Will Labour also concede now that the state is too big and it's not about money?
I think so. I think, of course, one of the reasons the state exploded in its size, particularly over the past few years, is because obviously we had those enforced lockdowns where the government was paying for everything from your salary to the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Of course, it's not healthy to have a government taking more of the revenues from the country than individuals and businesses. But again, in order to ensure that there is more money in people's pockets and in the hands of businesses, we need to get our economy growing. And at the moment, it simply isn't. And that is because, for a whole range of reasons, we have the highest levels of taxation since the war. The government haven't got rid of those unnecessary EU regulations. They keep saying they're going to do it. They've been saying it for 3 years. They're yet to actually do it. And of course, we've done nothing on our industrial strategy. Indeed, this government got rid of the UK's industrial strategy to boost manufacturing and growth. If the government paid attention to those things, we might be in a better position than we are now.
Brendan, is Keir Starmer serious about getting rid of the woke stuff, to paraphrase Tony Blair, when he has isolated his own MP, Rosie Duffield, not supporting her when she was harangued in Parliament 2 weeks ago by a fellow Member of Parliament from the Labour Party, the Labour benches, Lloyd Russell Moyle. No support for Rosie Duffield, who simply stands for the principle that men are men and women are women.
I think the way Rosie Duffield, and not just Rosie Duffield, in fact, but the way that particular MP treated other MPs in the House of Commons, mostly women MPs, was atrocious. I think MPs from all parties, including the Labour Party, should be able to express opinions in Parliament without fear of abuse. Now, in terms of whether or not the Labour Party needs to take a firmer line on this, I'm clear, as I think our Shadow Health Secretary once said, men have penises, women don't. That is what defines gender. And if the Labour... Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm not don't want to interrupt you, but you know, you've obviously, you know, you're saying what most people think, but we'd never hear Keir Starmer say that.
I think, of course, I think one of the things Keir is trying to do, and I can understand this, is there are a group of people in our society, a very, very small group of people in the trans community who are going through all sorts of things. They believe they're one gender when they're another, they're transitioning. It's a very complex area. And I think as someone that wants to be Prime Minister, what he's trying to do is speak to the whole nation, including that small minority of people. However small that minority may be, if he becomes Prime Minister, he will also be their Prime Minister. And so I think he's trying to tread a very difficult tightrope on this issue. You and I can be far more frank on these issues because we're not running to be Prime Minister, but Keir is. However, I think one thing that was very important was that last week, of course, he did, along with Yvette Cooper, our Shadow Home Secretary, oppose the Scottish trans person going into a women's prison.
Lovely to have you on. We'll speak again soon in My Take at 10. Can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? I think he can. That's next.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB Plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10 in just a moment, finally a Prime Minister who is serious about stopping the boats. Rishi Sunak is showing surprise courage by threatening to axe the hated European Court of Human Rights. My Mark Meets guest is distinguished Conservative MP and former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland. In the news agenda with my panel, when should new mothers go back to work? And is it unsophisticated to ask for a doggy bag for your restaurant leftovers? Plus, tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. Lots to get through, including that take at 10. Can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? First, the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hello, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. A private underwater rescue company will join the search for Nicola Bulley as fresh images of the missing mother of two have been released. The specialist diving company SGI will assist police searching the River Wyre after offering its services free of charge. It comes hours after the first images of Nicola on the day she disappeared were released by her family. Lancashire Police believe she fell into the river, but SGI's chief executive Peter Faulding says that may not be the case.
A huge operation. The police divers can only search the same as us with divers, 100, 150 metres a day. So this is 9 kilometres of river, whatever. So there's peaks and troughs. It's a slow moving river. If Nicola had gone in the river, she wouldn't have gone far because the river is not in flood. And my experience of dealing with these drowning victims, they don't normally travel far. They often, where they go down, they are there where they fall in.
The Metropolitan Police have again apologised to the victims of the serial rapist David Carrick ahead of his sentencing hearing tomorrow. The sacked police constable has admitted 49 criminal charges, including 24 counts of rape against 12 women. The force says they're truly sorry for the harm and devastation Carrick caused to the victims, saying he should never have been a police officer. The Met also says they're determined to address issues in the force.
In the weeks since he pleaded guilty, we have spoken about our genuine and urgent commitment to address the systemic failings that have been identified by our own reviews, by those of His Majesty's Inspectorate and Baroness Casey. We are determined to root out those who corrupt our integrity, and that work is already underway.
The UK's biggest nurses' unions offered to call off next week's planned strikes in England if the Prime Minister makes a new meaningful pay offer. The RCN's appealed to Rishi Sunak to match the offers made by the Welsh and Scottish governments, both of which have led to strikes being suspended. Well, nurses and ambulance staff are combining tomorrow, widely predicted to be the biggest day of strike action in the history of the NHS. And Ukraine says it's expecting a possible major new offensive from Russia this month as the anniversary of the invasion approaches. Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov says Ukraine will be able to hold off Moscow's forces despite not all of the West's military reinforcements arriving in time. However, the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, says they will receive up to 140 battle tanks on Tuesday in what he's described as a first wave of reinforcements being supplied by a Western coalition of 12 countries. TV online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan Tonight.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who returns in an hour's time, and many thanks to producer Maria for apparently fixing my makeup. I didn't know you could improve upon perfection. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. Big stories, big guests, and always big opinions in the news agenda with my panel. We'll be discussing how quickly should new mothers get back to the office? What's the correct time window after you've had a baby? And I'll be asking, is it unsophisticated to ask a restaurant for a leftovers doggy bag. Do you do it? Do you eat the food? Does the dog get the food? Plus, tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. And very excited about this, my Mark Meets guest. Live in the studio is the Conservative MP and former Cabinet Minister, Sir Robert Buckland. He's a top lawyer. I'll be asking him whether Rishi Sunak can stop the boats. A busy hour to come, plus some entertainment along the way. But first, my take at 10. Well, who'd have thunk it? The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is serious about sinking the business model of evil criminal gangs who traffic people across the Channel. Sunak's 5-point plan, which includes halving inflation, boosting growth and sorting the NHS, culminates in arguably his hardest challenge, to stop the boats. But he looks to be serious with a plan to introduce legislation which will see the deportation of anybody who does not face danger in their own country. That would, for example, resolve the issue of Albanians illegally entering Britain. Even though Albania hasn't seen war for a quarter of a century, many still enter this country and they claim refugee status. For too long, recent governments, including that of Boris Johnson, were happy to be seen to do something about the migrant crisis by introducing, for example, the Rwanda plan, but without having the political and legal teeth to actually see it through. Window dressing wouldn't seem to satisfy our current PM, who told the Sunday Times in an explosive article today that he's considering tearing up the legal rule book and taking Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights if Britain's efforts to stop crossings of up to 1,000 people a day are thwarted by the European courts. Now, if Sunak takes us out of the European Convention on Human Rights, let me tell you, there will be the mother of all dust-ups and no small amount of pearl-clutching from the left. Britain will be cast as an international nemesis, and right-on politicians and loophole lawyers here who have been helping these gangsters game the system for years will be up in arms. Last week on this channel, I posed the question about whether Sunak has the political backbone to see through his 5-point plan. Well, we now have black and white proof he most certainly does. The papers report today that if he takes Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights, a disastrous agreement courtesy of Tony Blair in 1999, then Sunak will respond to pushback from the courts and the political and media elite by making it a central plank of his 2024 election manifesto. With this extraordinarily radical move, Sunak will be able to claim to be the only politician that has a serious plan to put unscrupulous criminals out of business and to end the illegal crossings, which, be clear, are a humanitarian, societal, economic and national security disaster. It won't happen overnight, but if Sunak stops the boats, there'll be no stopping him. Stop the boats, win some votes. That's my view. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll be asking former Justice Secretary Robert Buckland live in the studio whether, in legal terms, Sunak can stop the boats. But first, let's get the reaction of my all-star panel. Top journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov, leader of UKIP and former Tory MP Neil Hamilton, and best-selling author and presenter Emma Wolfe. Neil Hamilton, Sunak wants to stop the boats, and it looks like he's serious.
Of course he's not serious. If you look at the story in the Sunday Times, it's just some government spin doctor anonymously saying, oh, well, if the European Court stands in the way of this legislation that they're putting through, then we'll think about leaving the ECHR after the next general election. Well, I don't think Mr Sunak will be in any position to do anything after the next general election because he won't be Prime Minister any longer. So this is just nonsense, and I think we shouldn't even be discussing this, really, because they have no intention whatsoever of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights or the Council of Europe. So it's just an attempt to pretend that they are going to do something, whereas in fact they aren't. Actually, all that's in this proposed legislation they could do anyway. It doesn't actually increase the powers of the British government to control our borders, because ultimately the arbiters of that will be the judges in the European Court of Human Rights who come from places like Azerbaijan or San Marino or Andorra. This is what we're talking about. This is the reality. Yes, of course we should get out of the European Convention on Human Rights and replace it with our own Bill of Rights, protecting the rights and freedoms of our own country. But it's our politicians who should ultimately take the political decisions where there are conflicts of interest, whereas it's, for example, the conflict between British national security and the rights of terrorists, or the rights of prisoners on voting and so on. These are not decisions that should be taken by anonymous foreign judges. These are decisions that should be taken by politicians that we elect and can throw out if we don't like what they do and say.
Emma Wolf, the illegal migrant crossings, sometimes 1,000 a day, is unacceptable to most Brits, and we are a very tolerant and welcoming country, but not the manner of those crossings every day, which is part of an evil business model, human trafficking. So Sunak's right to push for a solution, and don't you think this could be a game changer politically for him if he makes it a central plank of his 2024 manifesto that the courts and other politicians want to stop him stopping the boats?
Yeah, it would be a very popular move, and I think we are a welcoming country. We are a very generous country. We give a lot in foreign aid. Whenever there are crises, you know, the British people put their hands into their pockets. We are welcoming and we are a hospitable country. But the fact is, these boat crossings are not safe. They're going up, 50% on last year's numbers, 60%, I think, if you look back to 2021. A couple of the options being discussed, apparently, by Rishi Sunak are this idea of not being able to appeal, you know, being deported first and then appealing from the place at which you are deported to. To me, this kind of stuff sounds absolutely sensible. Whether or not they would actually leave the ECHR on this over this matter, I very much doubt. But I think Rishi Sunak, if he's genuine about this, is finally showing a little bit of backbone.
Well, I think so. Nina Mishkov, it's a headache for Labour, because if Sunak gets a grip on the migrant crisis and is willing to test the law in getting a grip on it, then he could win the next election.
I very much doubt if Sunak will win the next election. The thing is, you know, the ECHR, do you know it was proposed by Winston Churchill? It was his idea. And it was drawn up mostly by British lawyers. And here we are, decades later, ditching it for some kind of just as a convenience, you know, or an inconvenience. Sorry. I mean, the thing is.
Well, we're not ditching it.
Well, trying to ditch it.
And we won't.
Well, you say we won't. But the point being that because we do not have a proper system, we do not have a legal way, we do not have somewhere in France where people can go to and say, can I come to the UK? Because we don't have that sort of system, it makes it really... And if we had a Home Office that was fit for purpose, that could process people quickly, then we would be in with a chance. But these process arrangements are taking, you know, months and months and sometimes years.
Nina,
people can't work.
Nina, you have to tackle the issue of supply. You have to break the business model. Why was it that it was a European court that blocked the Rwanda plan, which would be a disincentive to these gangsters?
That is an inhumane plan. You have to have humanity. You have to...
The Supreme Court of our country decided that it wasn't. Why should some unelected, unknown official of the European Court of Human Rights overrule our Supreme Court?
They decided it was not illegal. I'm saying inhumane. Inhumane. Okay. I agree. You know, we are a very, very, very philanthropic society, and generous too. Something that, you know, like children in need. You know, we raise millions and millions and millions, and those same people think that sending people off to Rwanda is inhumane.
Rwanda's a perfectly safe country.
You say that. You say that so glibly. It is absolutely...
I'm not saying it glibly at all. As a matter of fact.
Well, look, what went on 20 years ago in Rwanda? I mean,
20 years ago is different.
It is not that same country. It is the same country. It is run by...
Completely different government.
There's government. You call it a government.
It is a government. And they're in the Commonwealth.
There's absolutely...
They're members of the Commonwealth.
And there are some brutal people who are members of the Commonwealth. You cannot say the Commonwealth is some wonderful, shiny organisation that has...
OK.
with fabulous
That's
people.
like saying Germany is the same country in the 1940s as it is now.
Well, I tell you something, I don't think Nina Mishkov will be having her summer holidays in Rwanda, but what is your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. Can Rishi Sunak stop the boats? Will he chuck out the European Convention on Human Rights? Let's ask a top lawyer after this. Former Secretary of State for Justice, Sir Robert Buckland. He's next.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport and beyond. Tonight, criminal barrister and former Justice Secretary under Boris Johnson, Sir Robert Buckland, KBE MP. Sir Robert was previously Solicitor General for England and Wales, having been appointed to that role by the then Prime Minister David Cameron. Remember him? And he most recently served as Secretary of State for Wales, which must have been a proud moment given the fact that Sir Robert is a proud Welshman. He's been the Conservative Member of Parliament for South Swindon since 2010, and I'm delighted to say that Sir Robert Buckland, KBE MP, joins me now. Sir Robert, welcome to GB News.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
A proud moment for you to be knighted by the King, November of last year, and I believe you were his first man tonight.
I was a great honour to have that particular distinction, and a great pleasure for me to be received by our new king, and my parents were there as well. So it was a very special moment for.
And you are a proud Welshman. I know you weren't in post that long as Welsh Secretary, but that would have been a happy moment for you and your family.
Well, indeed it was. Although I'm representing an English seat, I'm very much a British politician. I believe in our UK, and therefore it was a big honour for me to serve, however briefly, in that office. In some ways, perhaps I'm lucky not to be there yesterday because Wales' start in the Six Nations has not been the greatest. We're a bit worried about their performance thus far, so I leave that to my successor to tough it out.
Yeah, indeed. Come on, Wales. Given the legal and diplomatic challenges, can Rishi Sunak stop the boats?
Well, I think that he's proving through the detail that he's been examining and the announcements he's made that he's got what it takes to stop the boats, because the short headline is, Mark, there's no poetry in this. There's no grand sweeping answer to stop what is a practical problem. This is going to take hard graft. This is going to take work like the bilateral deal that we need to do with Albania to stop criminals coming here and exploiting particularly young people in our country. That, I think, can happen, and we need to work on a country-by-country basis to really eliminate the source of this problem and, of course, tackle the criminality that underlies this latest manifestation of illegal migration into the UK.
Yes, am I right in thinking that no Albanian should be entering the UK illegally and remaining?
Well, in a nutshell, yes. I mean, Albania is a safe country. It's a European country. There hasn't been strife there for many, many years. You know, there's a whole range of other reasons underlying this behaviour that we need to tackle. And, you know, small boats is, if you like, the latest manifestation of what we had a few years ago with lorries. Remember the terrible suffocation incidents?
Shocking.
Now, and you know, the government and the authorities dealt with that through heat-seeking devices and other technology. You know, if we can end small boats, the reality is that we probably have drones or some sort of air-based incursion.
Do you think that's really possible?
Well, look, I think these are people who want to make money, and there are desperate people out there who'll pay whatever it takes to get into the UK. So we are facing organised criminality here, and therefore our operational capacity has to be at tip-top in order to deal with it. And that's why I get a bit impatient about some of the arguments I hear about the European Convention and about the law. I don't really think that cuts what is a really practical problem.
So you think the ECHR issue, ditching our sort of acknowledgement of that law, which is now in English statute. You think that's a red herring, ditching the ECHR?
I think it's a complete red herring. I mean, in the last year...
Wouldn't it allow us to ignore the rulings of European courts?
Well, European court rulings, unless they directly engage the UK, are advisory only anyway. It's not like that the EU court, which had a binding authority on anything to do with EU law in Britain. It's a totally different type of court. It's advisory. Do you know, I was looking at the figures. In the last year, the UK was found in breach of the convention only 2 times in the year. Russia, by the way, 347 times. Now, that tells you really about the reach of this court. I think that its control is overplayed. I think there's far too much cheap rhetoric about it. Let's focus upon what we can do domestically here, and also, frankly, you know, when it comes to safe routes of passage, if we can create a route of integrity through a British embassy or a High Commission, then we can say to those people who aren't taking those legitimate routes, what the hell are you doing on a boat? Why are you coming into our country clearly in an unlawful way when you've got the option of taking a safe and lawful route?
But those safe routes would not be on the UK mainland, crucially.
Not on the mainland. Yeah. And I think, you know, this point about having appeals abroad, do you know, I was a minister who actually passed domestic legislation in order to allow that to happen back in 2016. It was our domestic courts that actually ruled that was not possible. I think it's absolutely right that we revisit those issues and push things as far as we can. But I think talk about withdrawal from a convention that British Conservative lawyers wrote back in 1950 threatens to put us out in the same place as Russia.
Foisted upon us by Tony Blair in 1999.
Well, the Human Rights Act, of course, was the new Labour creation. Now, when I was Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary, I wanted to carry out the manifesto commitment to reform and update that to make it really much more fit for purpose in the 2020s. The government's come up with a Bill of Rights, which I think is, frankly, a bit of a Christmas tree, an all bells, all whistles approach that I don't think we need. Let's use the common law of this country. Let's use our parliamentary statute, and let's create the right balance between the need to have rights, but also the need to protect our own freedoms as well.
You don't see Strasbourg as a potential legal stumbling block to stopping the boats, fundamentally?
Look, cases will be brought, and ultimately there might be a challenge that takes us to Strasbourg. Frankly, looking at the number of cases where the UK is found in breach, I don't think it's anything we should worry ourselves about, to the extent that we should leave an institution that we helped create. And that's why I think wasting time and energy on talking about withdrawal is costing us time at the expense of the practical solutions that I think Rishi Sunak has been focusing on.
Keen to get to some other issues, but last point on this, because it's very important to many of my viewers. Could we establish the principle that if you enter the country illegally, you will not receive asylum, which is something that has been hinted at by Rishi Sunak? Can that work legally? Is that morally and politically and legally the right thing to do?
Well, I think that already we've got presumptions, and indeed in laws that we passed last year when I was in government, we've already created a lot of presumptions about illegal arrival and the method of arrival in the UK determining your status. I think as a fair and tolerant country, we'll always have room for people who are genuine victims of political and social persecution. That's our great tradition, from the Huguenots right through to the modern era.
Illegally.
Well, there might.
So you wouldn't tar everyone with the same brush.
Yeah, there might be some cases where that could be looked at, but this is the point, Mark. I think if people come forward early and say why they're here, we can avoid this repeat application process that we often get with people, which just prolongs the agony and makes this a very drawn-out process. But at the same time, we need more resources to get on with these cases and get them through the system far more efficiently.
By all accounts, you were a brilliant and reforming Justice Secretary. The then chair of the Justice Select Committee, Sir Bob Neill, said you'd been shabbily treated on departure from the role. I can see no good reason for it at all. He was doing a good job as Justice Secretary, crucially understood the constitutional importance of the Lord Chancellor as a guardian of the justice system, and he was entirely loyal to the Prime Minister. I think he's been shabbily treated. You said, you've always been very dignified about it since you left that office. It doesn't seem, from what I've read and what I understand, that it had much to do with my work. You left that job and, you were replaced by Dominic Raab, who I don't think has covered himself in glory in recent roles, certainly among his employees. Is he a vicious bully? Should he stand down?
Well, look, there's an ongoing investigation into those matters. I'm not going to comment about it. I'm not in a position to comment. I mean, Dominic wasn't a minister in the department with me. I've not seen him in the department.
Have you heard rumours he's a bit of a difficult boss?
Well, look, we've all heard what we've heard. And we read the newspapers. But I'm going to let due process take its course. You'd expect me to say that as a lawyer. What I will say about my time is that I'm very proud of the fact that we tightened up sentencing law. We increased the proportion of time in prison that serious rapists and violent offenders serve. And we really I worked very hard to make sure that sentencing law made more sense. Yeah. Now, it's not perfect, but I do think in the 2 or so years I had at the department, my knowledge of the criminal justice system and my experience of it as a prosecutor and a defender meant that I was able to get on with the job and make those changes. And I wish that I'd had more time and space to carry on with that work, to support our police, to reform the system, to get those prosecutions running well, and to make sure that people felt that the justice system actually meted out that fairness and justice that this country has a great reputation for, and which, in recent years we've been under huge pressure about, particularly with the COVID crisis as well, affecting the courts and the way that they worked. So unfinished business for me, but a huge honour to have served in those 2 years.
I've only got a few seconds left. I'm sure that there's a chance you could re-enter the cabinet after the next election, but you'd need to win that election first. What are the chances of Rishi Sunak achieving a majority in the next election?
Well, having been in many elections, Mark, I've won and I've lost elections. I was in the 97 deluge, I won in 2010 and won in 2019. I think it's still all to play for. I am not convinced from my conversations on the doorstep, which I have most weeks with my residents, that they are yet sold on Keir Starmer and Labour. I don't think they see the substance there that they need to convince them that Labour is ready for government. We've got a lot of work to do as a Conservative Party to convince the country that we are fit for the next 5 years. But I think it's all to play for, and I think that election is still there to be won.
Yes, because you supported Rishi Sunak, but then you swapped support to Liz Truss, but you're supporting Rishi again now.
Well, look, I think we should get behind the leader now. It's important that the Conservative Party unites.
Is he a good Prime Minister?
I think he's working extremely well. I think he's proving that he can do the job, and he's making the right calls. And he's somebody of integrity who's working hard. That's, I think, what the country needs at this time of huge pressure on our economy, on our energy prices, and on, indeed, our very security, both in terms of defence, food and energy, and all the things that matter to all of us who love this country.
Always a pleasure to have a Knight of the Realm on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
Especially a Welshman. So my thanks to Sir Robert Buckland MP. Lots more to come, including next up, The Papers with full panel reaction. See you shortly.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
It's just gone 10:30 and it's tomorrow's papers. Monday's papers, of course. So, where shall we start? Let's go to the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail lead with the following. No wonder NHS can't afford union pay demands. On the day of the biggest ever strike, the Mail reveals that the health service spends £400,000 a day on private ambulances and taxis for patients. That's right, the NHS is spending almost £500,000 every day on private ambulances and taxis to plug gaps in emergency care. The biggest industrial action in health service history begins tomorrow, with paramedics, nurses and midwives all walking out in a dispute over salaries and patient safety. But a Mail investigation lays bare the dire state of the ambulance service, with call-outs on the rise and staff quitting in droves. OK, next up, let's go to The Guardian. Chief nurses warn over deadlock on NHS pay. Deadlock over NHS pay is putting patients in danger and risks hardening the union's positions. This, according to 10 chief nurses. 1 in 10 police officers slipped through vetting. Police officers with convictions and who have links to criminals are among hundreds of recruits since 2020. And she went out of her way not to listen. Tories scorn Liz Truss's claims that she was badly treated whilst Prime Minister. Let's go to The Independent next. Amber Rudd, I said I wouldn't trust Boris to drive me home, and then he tried to get me in the back of his car. That's a bit of a bombshell revelation. Meanwhile, Truss condemned for comeback fantasy. Liz Truss and her allies were accused of living in a fantasy world yesterday after her defence of her disastrous 6-week reign in Number 10 sparked a furious backlash from senior Tories. The former Prime Minister was accused of sour grapes after she offered no apology for the turmoil of the autumn in a 4,000-word article that blamed the economic establishment and resistant to tax cuts from her own party. But supporters of the Prime Minister accused Miss Truss of trying to destabilise Rishi Sunak's government. OK, now let's go to the Express now. Nicola's family hurt by vile theories. Friends of Nicola Bulley say vile theories shared online about the mother of two's disappearance are incredibly hurtful to her family. Police have also taken the extraordinary step of condemning cruel speculation about what may have happened to this mother of two. Now, we'll, of course, keep you updated on that. A really, really worrying story. Doorcam pics of Nicola. 1 hour later, she vanished. These are the final pictures of Nicola Bulley before she disappeared. The images were taken by a doorbell camera at her home in Lancashire about an hour before she was last seen. She's shown putting her dog in the car before driving her kids to school on January the 27th. Her partner said he will not entertain any other outcome than her being found alive. Metro. When Harry met Sasha, Prince Charming, Sasha Walpole, has told how she helped the royal lose his virginity. There you go. So, of course, that was a revelation from his book. Well, the woman has been revealed. Meanwhile, Truss blames Lefty City. She still doesn't get it. Liz Truss reignited the Conservatives' civil war as she blamed her party, left-leaning economic experts and the City of London for ruining her premiership. The newspaper, Truss sparks Tory turmoil over tax cuts. Financial Times, Beijing slams US for downing balloon in further strain on trade relations. And last but not least, the Daily Star. Beast from the East returns, Arctic brass monkeys. Energy grid under pressure in polar plunge. A -8-degree polar plunge will leave Britain colder than the Arctic and put pressure on the national grid. Time to bring out those woolies. Let's now get reaction to all of tomorrow's papers with Neil Hamilton, who is, of course, the leader of UKIP and a former Conservative MP. We have broadcaster and writer Emma Wolfe. And Fleet Street legend, presenter and journalist, author, you name it, Nina Mishkov. Let's talk about this particularly shocking revelation, Nina, in the Daily Mail. Almost £500,000 a day spent on private ambulances and taxis for patients.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. In England alone, we are missing 47,000 nurses. And they are leaving the service in droves, and you can't get new people. Now, the government is to blame because they have just not sat down and negotiated properly. What the government seems to be doing is to kicking every strike down the road. The transport strike could have been fixed last summer, but they have not put any proper proposals to the unions. So their idea is to kick it down the road so that the public will get sick of them. Well, the public has not actually. The public are mostly behind the strikers, and particularly in the case of the nurses. And the other thing is, I noticed that by kicking it further down the road, they're taking it from last year's into next year. So they're saving money by just not negotiating. So that, but that doesn't mean to say that the NHS shouldn't be better organised. This seems to me ridiculous.
But this strike action is costing the NHS £400,000 a day, which is tangible proof that these strikes are unethical?
They're not unethical because the government should sort it out.
But
because
if the NHS wastes money like that, that's going to impact healthcare, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying.
Well, then don't go on strike.
But the system is broken. The system needs to be fixed, and the government needs to negotiate seriously. They don't
19%?
They're not asking for that. That's a negotiating thing. They've made it very clear in the last couple of weeks that that figure is nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. And in Scotland and Wales, they've negotiated and the strikes are off. So why doesn't
taxpayers paying the bill?
OK. Neil Hamilton, what's your reaction to this story that the strikes mean that the NHS is having to use private healthcare providers, private ambulances and even taxis for patients?
Yeah, well, it makes good sense, and otherwise people wouldn't get treated. The government or the health trusts have got no choice. Personally, I'd be very happy to see a much greater involvement of the private sector in the health service. That may be part of the solution to our problems, because we have this vast monolithic institution that has been unchanged effectively for over 70 years. Completely different world, the 1940s, when it was created. And no other country in Europe has a model like ours. They've all got their problems, but none of their problems are the same sort of level as we got in this country. We need to get more money into the health service.
So we should be more European as far as health is concerned.
Well, there isn't one single European
No, well, you've just said that.
No, but what I'm saying is you can learn from other countries.
Both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't want to be out of Europe and then be European.
Well, you can still adopt the ideas of individual EU nation states, such as a
European health.
Germany, which is a hybrid.
I'm a European. We don't have to be in the European Union.
No.
The European Union doesn't have anything to do with the provision of health services.
But what you've been saying is what people have actually been saying, that the government is running down the health service.
It's not running the health service. Spending more money than ever before.
Deliberately letting it run down so that private companies can come and
running it down at a cost of £13,000 per household.
Absolutely.
Pour more billions into the NHS. It's a completely inefficient, badly managed system.
More is spent on the health service.
We understand.
One at a time. Neil?
More is spent on the health service in absolute terms, pounds, shillings and pence, and as a proportion of our GDP than ever before.
Germany spends more on their health service than we do, and so does France.
Yes, but they spend it in different ways. And the real problem with this country...
Never mind, but you can't say we spend more than anybody else.
No, but I didn't say that.
We don't put enough money into the NHS.
What I said is we are spending more than we have ever done before on health in this country. So the idea that the government is running it down is just nonsense.
Well, the thing is, you just mentioned the elephant in the corner, which is privatisation.
Well,
Emma,
what's wrong with privatisation?
Oh, for heaven's sake.
The private sector provides all sorts of things that are vital to our lives. Food, for example. And are we going to nationalise supermarkets?
If it was privatised, you would have the health service being run to make profits for the people who have a financial...
But the rest of Europe has co-payment
Look at our
systems.
train service. Our train services are run badly to provide money for the people who own it.
They weren't much better under National Rail, were they?
Their services certainly ran, and people could afford them. The cost of getting a train in this country is outrageous.
I think recollections may vary, as the Queen once put it in another context. But
I can remember British Rail, and it was not particularly efficient, but it didn't actually cost a fortune. It could be better run.
But we need to get more money into the system, into health. You're not going to be able to do that through taxation. So what we need to do is have co-payment systems such as they have everywhere else virtually in Europe and in other parts of the world as well, where it's a combination of private and public provision. And that works much better, is much more flexible, and there isn't the resistance that we've got in this country to spending the money, because it doesn't have to come from the taxpayer's pocket. Emma, competing with other things in the budget.
Emma Wolf, the strikes are costing the NHS, just in one department, which is ferrying people in and out of hospital, £400,000 a day. Of course, that's the tip of the iceberg, $500,000. Are these strikes by ambulance workers, ambulance drivers and nurses unethical, given the fact that it's likely to impact not just patient care, but possibly the loss of life?
Yes, people will die as a result of these strikes. And Monday, tomorrow, is the biggest strike day ever across the NHS. Absolutely shocking. And I think that people who go into healthcare should be demanding 19%. And Nina may say
They're
that's...
not demanding 19% now. It's a bargaining position. It's a bargaining position, and nobody expects 19%.
But even to be talking about 19%, I mean, you know, at a time when other people haven't had a pay increase for years, actually,
Especially
frankly.
in the private sector.
In the private sector, yes. And where prices are soaring and when the entire country is having to tighten their belts. To be demanding that kind of increase is absolutely ludicrous.
They are not demanding that. I bet that you know that.
But we have an independent system of pay negotiation, which the Labour Party introduced in the first place in the health service to weigh up the rights and wrongs of these pay negotiations. The next year's round is about to begin, and why can't we wait until next year? Next year's round of negotiations.
They've lost out on any pay rise.
I'm just sick of this myth that anybody who works in the NHS is a hero. Many of them are wonderful people, absolutely. But no, Nina, I can say
I'm not saying they're a hero. I'm saying most of them are people for whom it is a vocation.
Many people,
and they are being taken advantage of because of that.
Not taken advantage of at all.
The
average pay for nurses is over 30,000.
Why do you say it's a vocation any more than someone who's stacking supermarket shelves? It's not
because it takes a damn sight more. It takes it's not just a job like stacking shelves. It's a highly skilled job, and you have to be very dedicated to do it. And I doubt very much any of us sitting here.
I tell you what, this conversation will continue after the break. Sparks are flying. We also the Times newspaper is in as well. That's after this.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, quite a big reaction on email to that front page of the... let's make sure I get the right paper, because it's got all the papers. By the way, a lot of Liz Truss in there, which is the topic of my big opinion, which you can see on Twitter at GB News, courtesy of Paige from our digital team. But that's the Daily Mail. No wonder the NHS can't afford union pay demands. On the day of the biggest ever strike, the Mail reveals that Health Service spends £400,000 a day on private ambulances and taxis because the ambulance drivers are on strike. 400 grand a day. Well, Helen says, I'm shocked at that figure you mentioned. I ended up in Southampton General 10 years ago for nearly a week. I was most surprised to be sent home 20 miles in a taxi. I had no one anywhere who could help or pick me up. Well, Helen, I hope you're feeling much better now and that you've recovered. We'll get to more of your emails shortly, but we've got hot off the press, the Times newspaper now. Let's have a look at that. And the Times lead with... Unions accused of risking lives with biggest ever NHS walkout, and delusional Truss will cost votes, Tories fear. Sunak allies hit out as former PM plots a return. Also, a move to let motorists compare all fuel prices. About time. Let's get further reaction now to tomorrow's papers with journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov, the leader also of UKIP and former Tory MP Neil Hamilton, and best-selling author and presenter Emma Wolfe. Brilliant stuff. Quick words on Liz Truss. It was a dominant topic in the first hour, Neil. Delusional Truss will cost votes, Tories fear. You are an ex-Tory. Do you think her intervention is unwelcome politically?
No, I think it's a very welcome intervention. It's a very important debate that we should be having about the need for tax cuts as well as controlling government spending. But you know, it's a pretty sterile debate, really, because the reason why Liz Truss got pushed out was because of all the chaos which surrounded the mini-budget. But, of course, the big elephant in the room in the mini-budget was not the proposed tax cuts, which we're now not getting, but the size of the unfunded energy package, which was many, many, many times the headline costs of the proposed tax cuts. You know, there's corporation tax increase, which we're going to have in a few weeks' time, from 18% to 25%, it's going to raise about 18 billion. The energy package could have been costing anything between 50 and 150 billion. That's what spooked the market.
It was unlimited liability, a fascinating perspective. Let's move on now to pregnancy and once you've given birth. Reality star Chloe Madeley revealed that she went back to work 8 weeks after giving birth to her first child with former rugby union player James Haskell. Madeley cut her maternity leave short to start earning money again. Mothers are entitled to approximately 52 weeks of maternity leave, so it begs the question, how soon should new mothers get back to work? Now, Emma Wolfe, you had a baby a couple of years ago, 2.5 years?
2 years ago, yeah, 2.5 years ago.
Congratulations, a little boy.
Yeah.
Handsome little devil, I've seen pictures. What is
I mentioned him?
Well, have you mentioned him? Maybe once or twice.
Sorry.
What is a respectable length of time before you go back?
A few hours after I had my caesarean, major surgery, I was completing a 2,000-word article in the maternity ward, finishing an article off for the Britain's leading newspaper. That evening, Daily Mail. That evening, a big feature article about the birth, which I couldn't write before the birth. That evening, I was barricaded in the maternity ward in a lockdown hospital, doing my regular Saturday night radio slot in the bathroom with the midwives battering on the door.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
So you went on the radio having given birth?
Yeah, and they were saying, what are you doing in there? And I said, look, is the baby all right? Or let me just get on with my radio by phone. I mean, I was lucky. Having a baby in lockdown actually meant that all of my work I was pretty much able to do remotely. I think this thing about when you go back to work, because you referenced earlier going back to the office.
Yeah.
Chloe Madeley is talking about going back to work as a personal trainer. I was able to go back to work literally within hours because I write, because I'm a writer and I'm a broadcaster, whatever. It's virtual. If you're doing something very physical, it really depends on the woman, the birth, the baby, what job you're actually doing.
Let the woman decide. And don't judge a woman for going back to work too soon. Some women get dagger stares in the office for going back too soon, like you're a bad mother.
You know, that's completely ludicrous. Women should be able to. You know, it's not like you're ill. You know, you've had a baby.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, our neighbour is a paediatrician at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Her third child she had about 8 months ago. She walked out very pregnant on a Friday morning. Hospital up the road, Royal Free. Came back at 5 o'clock carrying the baby, having had a caesarean. Now, you know, absolutely fine.
Well, that's pretty. Yeah, I'm pretty amazed that she was walking a few hours after
Some
caesarean.
heroic. Well, listen, let me tell you that 13 years after having had my second son, my body's still not all right. And I still don't feel comfortable at work. But there you go.
But you've lost the baby weight, haven't you?
I've lost the baby weight. I still take the naps, and I'm still getting the hot flushes.
Are you still being breastfed?
Well, no, she's gone on strike in that department. I can't imagine why. A few seconds on this, doggy bags. Big restaurant chains like Pizza Express are going to let people have a doggy bag. That means that you didn't eat it all, you bring it home. It's not for the dog, it's for you. Is it uncivilised? Is it unsophisticated?
It's a bit naff. I think it's a bit naff. I mean, it started in America because they get such huge serves in America, and, you know, you couldn't possibly eat it.
Yeah.
But, you know, people over-order, I suppose, and then they...
Neil, have you ever done a doggy bag with Christine?
I never leave anything on the plate.
I knew that. How about you, Emma?
Restaurants are a distant memory. I can't remember a wine bar, a restaurant or a pub.
Oh, listen, I'd love to buy you all dinner because that was a great show tonight. Thanks to my wonderful panel. And also, thanks to you for your company tonight. It's been great to be back. I'm looking after the Mark Stein slot Wednesday and Thursday of this week, and I'm back on Friday as well. See you then.
Hello, very good evening to you. We have something of a north-south split through tonight with some cloud and some rain across northern parts. Clearer skies further south, but that brings the risk of some frost and some fog. At the moment, we have high pressure across the UK, hence why it's so settled, particularly for southern parts. But notice there is a weather front waiting out in the Atlantic, and this is going to push its way towards the UK as we go through Monday. Back to the here and now, though, and across Sunday night, we are going to see clear skies for many parts of England and Wales, thicker cloud for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, a few spots of drizzly rain and some blustery winds around the northwest coasts. Because of the clear skies across England and Wales, that's where temperatures